afternoon to everyone. I, Arunendra Dvivedi, welcome you again to the session of ISO 27001 2022 Auditor Oblique Lead Auditor Training course. This is a day 3 for us. Okay, so we have studied about a lot of things. We'll just have a recap of what we have studied in the previous days. So we have gone through the clause number 4, basically, which talks about interested parties, the context of the organization, where the standard demands to document and identify the interested parties. Okay, identify their needs and expectations, identify the issues, and get them into the risk and opportunities. Okay. We have also identified that the identification of the scope is very important. Okay, and this scope of the certification, or the scope under which the boundary is being laid for the organization for that standard, okay, has to be taken care of, and that will come from the needs and expectations, the interested parties, the issues in the organization. Fifth clause, we have spoken about the roles and responsibilities of the people, the policy, the roles, responsibility, and authority, rather. The policy, how exactly we need to frame the policy, what all things we need to take into consideration. We need to take the consideration into the legal and statutory requirements, the organizational requirements, the customer requirement, the pledge toward the information security. We need to communicate these policies to all the relevant interested parties. Then we came to clause number 6, where it was basically the planning section. Okay. In planning, we identified how to identify the risk, how to identify the opportunities. We identified how exactly the above things that we identified in the clause number 4 about the needs and expectations, the issues, and the interested parties. Okay, those all needs to be taken into consideration into risk and opportunities. Then we studied about risk assessment. We have to perform the risk assessment, okay, based on the impact that is going to have on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization, on the information system, on the information, on the data. Okay. Then we move towards the objectives. We identified that we need to get all the objectives of the organization in respect to ISO 27001. We also studied that the objectives that we identify should also contain the risk, the higher list risks that are identified during the risk assessment. The objective should be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bounded. We also discussed few examples related to it. Then we came to clause number 8, basically the operational controls, okay, where it demands to perform the risk and opportunities. In clause number 6, it says you need to plan, you need to see the resources, you need to see the procedures, the process how exactly are going to calculate, the process how exactly are going to make sure that what is into the higher risk, what is into the low risk, and what exactly we need to take care if we have any of the risk or things. Okay, we have studied about planning of risk treatment in clause number 6. Here in clause number 8, we talk about risk treatment through the controls. Okay, all the identified controls that is mentioned in the annexure A. These controls basically are, we'll just go back to the controls. Okay, controls, if you see, we have organizational control, people control, physical control, and technological control. Okay, organizational control, they have 37 number of controls. People controls, they have 8 number. Physical controls, they have 14 numbers. Okay, we have studied about the operational controls. Okay, we have studied about the policies of the information. All the policies that are documented in the organization should be well written, should be well approved by the top management. The top management has to make sure that the ISMS policy, the policies like ISMS policy, acceptable use policy, mobile device key policy, and various other policies. Okay, the information security roles and responsibilities has to be defined as per the requirement of the standard, and also the requirement of the organization to perform the activities. For example, assigning the CISO. Okay, the access rights to the IT admin should be given. The HR role for onboarding and offboarding. Okay, and various other roles and responsibilities needs to be distributed among the organization. The segregation of duties. Okay, the duties that we give needs to be segregated between the people. For example, the different personnel handling approval, execution, and review of the transactions. These are the duties which needs to be given to different and specific people. We need to make sure that the conflict doesn't arise. The management responsibility, basically the responsibility of the top management is to review the policies, resource that are allocated, policy approvals. So the top management needs to make sure that everything which is happening in the organization, the information security management system should run as per the requirement of the four pillars, that is the standard requirement, the organizational requirement, the customer requirement, rather the stakeholders requirement, and the legal and statutory requirements. These four things has to be there in the information security management system. The top management needs to make sure that this is in the right place, this is in line with the requirements. Then contact with the authorities, of course, yes, the authorities which are basically responsible or which get the things done, the approving authorities. Okay, for example, the RBI, or maintaining the contact of details of the local cybercrime cell, the authority, the cybercrime cell needs to be communicated. Okay, the certain which performs the VAPT of the organization. Okay, the certain is basically responsible organization which is laid down by the government of India. Okay, where if the organization is performing the VAPT, they need to get empaneled with certain or registered to certain. Certain is basically a legal authority. It is basically for VAPT, vulnerability assessment and penetration test. Any organization, XYZ organization, if they want to apply to any of the organizational or if there here needs to be a control, the certain come into place where the organization who is performing the VAPT needs to get registered with certain to work with the public authorities for now. Okay, there are organizations who are not registered to certain, but yes, still they do the VAPT. It is acceptable, not acceptable. If you look at the standard requirement, it basically says VAPT needs to be done. VAPT is mandatory. Okay, certain is nowhere here. Okay, but if any of the bigger organization, for example, any of the bank, any of the NBFCs, okay, any of the public authorities, if they want to get their VAPT done, okay, they need to do it from the organization who is doing the VAPT, and that organization should be registered with certain. Okay, so this is the requirement of the bigger organization, the organization majorly who are directly related to the high critical vulnerabilities. Contact with special interest groups. Okay, for example, ISACA. ISACA is basically an organization which a group basically which takes care of the information security things in the industry. Okay, or the local cyber security forums. Okay, or maybe there can be another special interest group which you can be in contact. Threat intelligence, we need to gather the information, we need to gather what is happening in and around in relation to the cyber attacks, in relation to the cyber threats, in relation to the attacks. Okay, so we need to subscribe to threat feeds, analyzing phishing trends using security blogs. Okay, so all these things we need to analyze, and we need to have a proper documented structure where we identify what all intelligence threats or what all intelligence have we gathered from the industry, from our environment. Information security in project management control. The project management, the project that you are going to do needs to be identified, and a well proper plan needs to be there. The identification of the needs and expectations of the interested parties, the issues, risk assessment, objectives for that project. Okay, everything needs to be done. Okay, for example, I mentioned the conducting the risk assessment in the software development project, so that is one of the requirement. Inventory of information and other associated assets, of course, that I mentioned, all the assets which hold some value, the tangible or intangible assets, anything that holds the value needs to be registered. It has to be there. The documented information of these assets should be there. You need to prepare an asset register. Acceptable use of information and other associated assets. Okay, you need to have the policy of acceptable use. Okay, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Okay, for the information and the assets, where you, in which area it is acceptable and what area it is not acceptable. For example, AUP defining rules for internet, for emails, USB, personal device usage, and others. Return of assets. As we mentioned, the return of assets is important. If any organization has a policy where they give the assets to the people, of course, any organization is there, they will give the assets, some or the other assets. Okay, it can be an ID card, it can be a laptop, it can be a mobile, it can be the information. Okay, the information is also an asset because it holds in value. Okay, so it is important, okay, that whenever the person is leaving from the organization, they should hand over all the assets to the organization. Okay, you need to have a proper exit form, okay, where you say that yes, these are the assets that were given to you. You need to return these assets. Along with it, there will be some information, there will be some data which will be retained in the mind of the person. You cannot do in anything, but yes, you can have an agreement, okay, a relieving agreement where he agrees that yes, he has signed the NDA, okay, he has signed the other agreements, where if he understands, if he leaks out any of the confidential information, he can have a legal process, okay, he can be taken through a legal process. So we need to have this the information transfer. You need to have a procedure, you need to have a policy where how exactly you are going to transfer one file from one place to another. Okay, for example, secure email, the email should be secured. Okay, the encrypted file transfer via SFTP. If you are sending any confidential information, it can be encrypted. Okay, and use of DLP tools, data leakage protection tools. Access control, that you need to have a proper mechanism, you need to have a proper procedure where what access, what information's access is given to which people. Okay, so you need to have a role based access controls. Okay, user permissions in AD. We have studied till here. Is there any doubt that we have up to this area? Okay, so that means we are good to move ahead. Now we have identity management. So majorly in identity management, we call it to manage the life cycle of the project, the life cycle of the development of the code, the life cycle of the codes, okay, or the life cycle of any of the system that you develop or any of the operations that you have. We need to make sure that each and every process of the life cycle, each and every area of the life cycle of the project, okay, has to be properly identified. There are multiple identity solutions where if you put, okay, your controls, your the life cycle of the system, the life cycle of the project can be managed. Example, using centralized identity solution. So there are centralized identity solution like, yeah, Azure AD or Okta. Okay, they will have a log of the complete product's life cycle. Okay, and it will help you to manage according to the inputs that you have given, according to the procedures that you have. So you need to have a procedure for identity management. What process do you follow for the identity management? Authentication information. Okay, so if any information, what is authentication? So majorly when you talk about authentication, it is about if there is any information, okay, it has to be, or it should have come from an authentic source. Authentic source means who has been given the authority, who has been given the access to have this information with them. Okay, so we need to authenticate them. Okay, we need to make sure that yes, this is an authentic information. So how exactly we do the authentication? Normally we put some MFAs we put, okay, where we see, okay, there will be multi-factor authentication as we discussed yesterday, okay, or the encryption is sent, the encrypted file is sent. If that's the decryption file is used, okay, to encrypt the file, that means that is an authentication. Okay, so these are the things that we need to make sure that we have a proper process, we have a proper procedure for the authentication of the information. Access rights, okay, let's read what is written. Control, allocation and management of authentication information. We need to make sure that the allocation and the management, to whom it is allocated, the authentic, the information, okay, the access control is given to whom. Implement a management process for handling authentication data. That, as I mentioned, there has to be a proper procedure for handling the authentication of the data. Advise personal or proper handling and security of authentication information. Okay, for example, the password of the email. So we have to inform, or we have to educate the people that you don't have to give your password to anyone. Okay, that only can come from the awareness, that only can come from the guidelines, okay, that the password will not be shared to anyone. If there is anything which happens into his email, he will be responsible. He is the asset owner. Okay. The password also is an asset. It holds a value. Okay. So he is the asset owner. He has to understand and he has to take the ownership of that asset. Access rights. Okay. So we need to give the access of the information to the people who are intended for it. Okay. Who actually need the information. So provisioning, grant access based on needs and approval. Anyone who needs the information, okay, this need has to come, and the approval needs to be done from the person who is authorized for it. The authorized person should give the approval. It has to be regularly reviewed. Okay, the rights needs to be regularly reviewed. We need to see that if there is any change in needs, there can be an information which is needed by someone for a limited period of time. Okay, so we need to make sure that there has to be a proper review of the timeline till this date that department or that person required the information. Okay, now it need not to be given to him. Then this access needs to be removed. Okay. And that can only come from the review. The modification, okay. There can be multiple things that can be accessed by the organization, by the person, okay. Or there can be multiple things which can be not utilized by the person. Okay. So we need to modify the access. Okay. For example, granting. Okay. When we grant the, so if we are given the read and write both the permissions to someone, okay, we need to see that is there a need to modify the access that have been given. Okay, removal of the access. Now this is not required. We have removed this thing. Okay, policy compliance. Okay, the organizational control policies needs to be documented. Documentation. Okay, so all the access changes, all the logs, the history of the change of logs needs to be there. You have to maintain the log where you say that yes, all the permissions that have been given, modified or removed, okay, has to be there in the record. This is one of the mandatory requirement of the standard. You should have a procedure, a policy for granting, removing or modification of the access controls. The information security and supplier relationship. Of course, yes, any organization when they work, they will have the suppliers, they will have the vendors. A lot of information is shared between the supplier and the organization related to the information security. Okay, what all information can be shared? Okay, is there any requirement of having an agreement which should contain the portion of information security? What are the securities? What is the information that we are giving to any of the organization, to our vendors? Okay, we need to have this agreement. Okay, a regular awareness to your vendors about the cybersecurity, about the information security, about your needs, about your requirements, where these requirements are coming from. We need to educate them. This is coming from the legal authorities, because if you are into an industry where you are controlled by the legal authority or any of the statutory authority, okay, this also goes to your suppliers. Okay, if anything goes wrong, you are going to be the one who is going to answer. In those cases, you need to have a proper process, a proper documented system where how exactly your suppliers, your vendors, okay, they follow the same process, they follow the same ethics, they follow this a good managed system, okay, for the information security. A lot of organizations, when they work, they demand their vendors that boss, you need to be ISO 27001 certified. Earlier, I mean, not a lot of, but yes, around 2 years, if you talk about from now, 27001 was always required by the information technology industry, IT industry. Now, if you see, this IT industry has gone into almost all the industries. It has made its place. So when it has made its place there, then again the information security follows wherever this information technology goes. Now we as a certification body, we receive a lot of query from automotive industry, from the manufacturing, from the food manufacturing organizations. We have done certain of organizations who are into food system. Okay, so they basically have the information which needs to be taken care of. So this information security has gone into all the systems. Okay. In the same way, You as an organization who is getting into the information security, okay, you need to make sure that your vendors also follow the same level of information security requirement. Put a requirement. This can be a requirement in your vendor selection. Okay. Where this can be a requirement in your vendor selection. Okay. Where you say, okay, so if we need a vendor, we need to make sure that what are the informations that you are going to share. You need to identify for the critical information any vendor to whom we are giving the critical information, or we are exchanging the information which is critical to both the organization. We will ask them to get ISO 27001 certified with a proper process and a documented system. You will perform your audit to that organization. You will go and you will make sure that you see that yes, they perform, they have the policies, they have the procedures, they have the system which is going to have a positive impact on the information security. Okay. For the other ones, you may leave it for now, you may give it some time. Okay. You may have your procedure change. You can have a procedure where you mention that yes, high risk one first, second one once they have done, then we move ahead to the lower one. Okay. So you can design your own procedure, you can design your own policy, how exactly you are going to make sure that the information security at the supplier's end is good. When we talk about the risk, whenever you perform your risk activities, okay, a risk assessment, when you identify the risks and the opportunities from there, okay, you need to identify this, that when you do the performance risk assessment, you need to have your vendors into the system. Okay, you should include your vendors for the risk assessment. So here it says, see, it says risk assessment, evaluate security risks of supplier products and services. Supplier selection, choose based on the security capabilities that you mentioned. Contractual controls include security requirements in contracts, signing of the agreements. Access management, control and monitor supplier access, up to which level they can access. Monitoring, regularly review supplier security practices. Incident management, handle security incidents with suppliers. Okay. Compliance, ensure adherence to security standards. When you talk about the compliance, assuring adherence to the security standards. Security standards make all these legal requirements which are there, they need to be adhered. Termination, securely and supplier relationship. Okay. If there anywhere you see that the organization, the supplier is not following, is not up to the requirement of your information security policy on the system that you want, you need to terminate the relationship. Examples like you can have an NDA with vendors, including cybersecurity clause in the contracts. These are few of the examples. So this is about supplier relationship. Addressing information security with supplier. Okay. So requirement definition, establish security requirements tailored to supplier relationship. Of course, you need to have a proper security requirements which is according to the supplier. You should not impose anything which is not applicable. I, as one of the auditors, okay, I have seen a lot of requirements raised by the customers to their vendors, okay, where things which are not applicable, okay. I've seen the organization has raised a requirement to a construction company where they ask that organization, that construction company, to comply with HACCP, which is only for the food industry. Okay. So whenever we put the requirements, we need to see that yes, what all things are there, and the customers was saying this holds a high value, it needs to be there if you want to be our supplier. So make sure that you analyze your vendor. You see what sort of vendor, what services are you taking from them. According to that, you need to modify, you need to have your format and the inputs that you want from the supplier. Formalize agreed upon security requirements. Okay. Type-based customize requirements based on the nature and impact of the supplier relationship that we spoke just now. We need to have the tailored structure. Yes, so it says managing information security in the information and communication technology, that is ICT supply chain. So the ICT supply chain means wherever your information is flowing from one place to another. Okay, what is the method? How exactly it is going? So we'll talk about it one by one. What all are the requirements? Risk assessment, evaluate security risks in the ICT supply chain. Okay, we need to evaluate whenever we identify the risk, when we do the risk assessment, this ICT supply chain, where all your information is flowing, what is the supply chain that you have for the information security, information being flown to make sure that the information remains secure. Supplier selection, of course, that we spoke, we need to have the suppliers which are according to our checklist, according to the our requirement, which is clearly based on which is clearly based on your requirements and the complexity of the system of the suppliers. Of course, contractual requirements include security requirements in contracts, monitoring track supplier compliance and performance, access right, restrict access to sensitive information. Make sure that you do not give any information, you do not give any access to the sensitive information. Basically, you need to make sure that there should be no access to the sensitive information that you have in your organization to the suppliers. Handle supply chain security incidents. If there are any incidents, okay, how exactly you need to handle it? You need to have an incident management system. Compliance, ensure adherence to security standards. Review, regularly update security procedures and policies. Okay, so for ICT, we need to have a proper defined system where we do the risk. We make sure that we identify the vendors in a proper way according to our requirements. The agreements, the contractual requirements should be very much clear. The compliance adherence should be there. And we need to regularly review and monitor the system that is being performed for the supply chain, the ICT supply chain. Monitoring, review, and change management of supplier services. So the organization will continuously assess and update its supplier information security practices and service delivery to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. We need to make sure that the system that has been developed, okay, for the supplier services, for the suppliers, for the vendors, they need to be properly monitored, reviewed, and also follow the change management. Okay, we studied about the change management in clause number 6, okay, where we say that any changes which are happening in the process or in any of the information security or ISMS structure, okay, it can be related to the human, it can be related to the increase of the products, it can be related to the information that is being shared anywhere. If there are any changes, it needs to be monitored. The same way, we need to make sure that if there are any changes with the supplier management, supplier services thing, we need to make sure that we have a proper record of this change management. So regular supplier performance reviews can be the one of the options, and contract reviews, renewals. We need to have a renewal policy. Okay, we need to have a review policy of the contracts. Information security for use of cloud controls, the cloud services. Okay, now we have a lot of, as we talk about information security management system. Now all the information, if you see the major information, the organizations, they keep their system, they keep their information on the cloud. Okay, so as it goes to cloud, the vulnerability automatically increases. The bigger the cloud, okay, the bigger the vulnerability related to those cloud, the related to the system, automatically increases. And to reduce the vulnerability, or to handle the vulnerability, we need to have a proper process of regularly monitoring and regularly seeing what are the vulnerabilities that we have in our system. In our system can be the user laptops, it can be the machines, it can be the server, it can be your website, it can be your servers, okay, or the external servers that you have. You need to make sure that those external servers, they are safe and secure. Okay, they also get a proper system. They should have a proper managed system where any information that is being kept by them, okay, kept on their cloud, okay, needs to be safe and secure. So acquisition, define criteria and procedures for selecting cloud services. What cloud services are you going to choose? What are the parameters? Establish guidelines for securely using cloud services. Implement processes for ongoing management and monitoring of cloud services. Develop procedures for securely transitioning away from cloud service. When you opt a cloud service, you keep a lot of information. If you don't want to use that cloud, what is the exit procedure? How, what all things are you going to take care when you remove your information from the cloud? Because there can be a situation where a copy of your information is retained in the system of the server. Okay, you need to have a proper contractual agreement. You need to make sure that the policy of the organization who is providing this cloud service, okay, has a policy of deleting your the information that you keep, and this deletion should be done through a managed process which takes care of the information security management system, the cyber security, data protection. So of course, yes, ISO 27001 is one of the standard that can be gone for. Okay, SOC can be done. SOC 1, SOC 2 for the financial, it is SOC 1. For the system, it is SOC 2. The organization can go for CMI. The organization can opt for regular VAPT, vulnerability assessment penetration test, through a recognized organization, through a good organization, or they can also implement some CSPM tools. Information security incident management planning and preparation. When we talk about incident management, the security incident management, okay, we need to have a proper planned so this planning, when we talk about any incident which is happening in the organization, how exactly are you going to manage this incident? Okay, that needs to be done through a risk assessment. When you perform the risk assessment, okay, what all are the attacks, what all are the vulnerabilities, what all are the risks that can have an impact on the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, what if any incident happens? How exactly are you going to manage? This is all procedure and policies maintained in the clause number 6 against the risk assessment, risk and opportunities. Okay, so it says planning, develop a strategy for managing information security incidents, define and document incident management processes, establish and assign clear roles and responsibilities for incident handling, communicate incident management procedures to relevant persons. So you need to have an incident response plan. What is the business continuity plan you have? This standard also demands from we will have a control on it, okay, where it asks for business continuity plan. Okay, you need to have a BCP, you need to have a BIA. Business impact analysis is important. Okay, business continuity plan you need to have. Okay, do you have a site? What is the RTO? Okay, recovery time. What is the recovery time? Okay, what is RPO? So it all needs to be there for the system to make sure that the information that you have, the data that you have, okay, or the system that you are running, okay, is safe and secure. If there is any incident, if there is something which is going to disrupt the process, disrupt the information security system, okay, you need to have a backup, and that is done through the business continuity plan, BCP. There's a different set of standard, a set of standard which talks ISO 22301, okay, which talks about business continuity management system. Okay, it talks about all these things. A proper system to have BIA, BCPs, what is RTO, recovery time, what is your backup time. Okay, so it demands everything. Okay, so of course that is also a standard which is directly related to the information security. And of course awareness is one of the important topic that needs to be taken care when we talk about the incident management. People should know about it. If they don't know, how exactly are they going to manage the process? Assessment and decision on information security event. So if there is any security event, okay, event means there's an attack. Okay, so what are the decisions that needs to be taken? How exactly are you going to assess the security event? You need to do the assessment of the security event, how critical it is, what are the impacts it is going to make. Okay, and once you identify all those critical parameters, you need to take a decision what to do, how to do. Okay, so what to do decision needs to come from a authorized person, a responsible person. Okay, so event assessment, we'll go through it. Event assessment, evaluate information security events to determine their nature and impact. That of course will be done when the event arises. Okay, and you map it with the risk and the impact that is going to have on CIA. You need to see what is the impact it is going to have. Any event that happens needs to have a proper event assessment done. Okay, incident categorization, decide if an event qualifies as an information security incident based on the predefined criteria. As mentioned, you need to see that what is the level, what is the high risk, okay, what is the risk criteria that you have defined for the event management. Decision criteria: apply established criteria to categorize events consistently and accurately. Okay, so you need to have a proper criteria where you categorize events and you have people who can take the decision on it. For example, logging and tries of suspicious login attempts. If there's a login attempt, okay, that is an event. Well, now what you need to do on it? How exactly? You need to see where is the gap, what is the vulnerability, okay, and you need to close that vulnerability. Response to information security incidents. Okay, you need to have a proper procedure, you need to have a proper policy. Okay, how exactly you are going to respond to the information security incidents. For all the controls that we are talking about, okay, every control should have a document, procedure or a policy. Maybe one procedure can contain multiple controls. For example, when we talk about the vendors, when we talk about the ICT supply chain, so this can be clubbed in one procedure. While you document statement of applicability SOA, you need to see that each control or how many controls are aligning with each other. You need not make a different procedure for each control. You can have one procedure for multiple controls where all the portion of the controls needs to be documented. Okay. Now when we talk about information security incidents, okay, now when you go to clause number 6, there it talks about the procedures. It basically talks about the procedures. Okay, of course there will be records, there will be risk assessment, there will be a risk register, everything will be there, but the procedure for security incidents. Okay, so when you define a procedure where you say, okay, this is how exactly we are going to identify the risk, okay, this is how we are going to treat it, this is what we are going to how exactly we are going to respond to the security incidents. This can be there one from one. Learning from information security incident, for example, the next control. Okay, now output, you can have a meeting, you can have whenever a security event happens, okay, it will be taken care of, the response will be done, it will be closed, then we'll have a meeting, and from meeting we will have a report, okay, which will talk about what all did we learn, okay, what all we wanted to do, what all should have been there, which should have I mean the control that you extra need to put to make sure that this kind of attack is not there again. Okay. You can have one procedure. Now, a response to information security incidents: detect the incident, inform relevant parties, evaluate impact and severity, limit the incident's spread, remove the root cause, restore normal operations, record actions and decisions, analyze and improve response, document and report to authorities. Okay. Now, if you see this control and the next control, learning from information security incidents, when you report to the authorities, okay, of course you will report it once you have a proper closing meeting for that incident. Okay, you will see that what all was the information, what all was the problem, okay, what all did we come to know. Okay, this everything will be there in the minutes, in the report, okay, when you submit it to the authority. So your control learning from the information security incident automatically covers into the same procedure. So again saying, you can have a single procedure for multiple controls, making sure that all the elements of each control are addressed in that procedure. Collection of evidence. Okay. So you must be very much familiar with NIST framework. So what exactly this NIST says is identify, collect, acquire, and preserve. Right. So this standard ISO 27001, if you look at the controls, the 27002, if you see in the start, it mentions that this complete system runs on the NIST framework, which basically talks about identification of the threats or the identification of the incidents, collecting the evidences, okay, then acquiring and preserving it. Okay, so when we talk about the NIST framework, okay, it talks about the identification, the governance, the control, and the preventiveness. Okay, so the cybersecurity concepts basically come into picture where it talks about what action need to be done, how exactly it needs to be done. Okay, so we need to collect all the evidences, okay, that we gather into the act of event or act of incident. Information security disruption. This is what exactly we were talking about, that is ISO 22301 business continuity plan, having a business continuity drills. Okay, this is going to make sure that your system runs into such a way where if there is a disruption in any of the critical process, okay, you have a parallel line where you can shift it and can run it smoothly. Okay, so you need to have a business impact analysis. You need to see that what all are the critical functions which can get impacted, what all factors can get it impacted. Okay, and then should have a business continuity plan. You need to have a plan where you say, if something happens, this is what we are going to do. Okay. If the line is cut, we can shift to another line. ICT readiness for business continuity. It also talks about the same. Align ICT strategies and business continuity goals. Deploy necessary ICT systems and processes. Regularly update and manage ICT systems. Okay. Verify ICT readiness through tests and simulations. Document, record all activities of future reference. So you need to have a system where if there is any disruption, there is a BCP, business continuity plan, needs to be there. Okay, and you need to regularly make sure that you regularly review this business continuity plan and perform drills for this business continuity. Okay, it is a mandatory requirement of the standard. You need to have a BCP. You need to have a business impact done, analysis done, legal, statutory, regulatory, and contractual requirements. So, of course, if there are any legal requirements, if there are any regulatory, or if there are any contractual requirements, your customer may have given you some requirement that you need to. If you are a vendor of someone, okay, the same system that needs to be followed with the ICT supply chain will also be followed with you. Okay, so you need to make sure that if there are any contractual requirements, if your customer has raised or any of the stakeholders has raised any requirement needs in terms of information security, needs to be properly addressed and adhered. It also depends in which country you are working. For example, if you are working in India, you need to make sure that you have PDPL. Okay. If you are working in European market, you need to have GDPR. Okay. Sorry, PDPL is basically for Saudi Arabia. If you are working in India, you need to have DPDP Act, compliant to DPDP Act. These all acts, when you talk about GDPR, when you talk about PDPL, when you talk about DPDP, they all are the laws for the information and data security, the private information of the employees, or sorry, the private information of any of the person working under you or for you. ISO 27701 is one of the standard, okay, which talks about privacy information management system. ISO 27001, okay, talks about three things: cybersecurity, information security, and privacy security. These are the three things that this new version of the standard 27001 2022 demands. Now, a management system, it says you should have a procedure for privacy information. Okay, but how exactly are you going to control will come from a proper processed and managed system. This managed system is basically ISO 27701. It was basically an old version, ISO 27701 2020, I guess. Okay, so 27701. Now a new system is coming. A revised standard is coming. Okay. ISO 27701 2025 is coming. Okay. Now, or there is going to be a change, maybe not 25, but yes, 26 maybe. For now, if you want to have a 27701, having 27001 certification is mandatory. But in the coming years, or but in the coming version of the standard 27701, okay, you will not have any requirement of 27001 if you want 27701. You can go standalone. It is going to become a standalone system. For now, it is an extension to 27001. If you read, you will see Privacy Information Management System, extension to ISO 27001 2022 standard. Okay. For the certification, if you have 27001 previously and you want to go for 27701, of course you can go, but the certification cycle will have to be aligned with 27001. The expiry date of 27001 and 27701 are going to be same. It is not going to change. But in the newer version, as mentioned, you can go for it individually. It will be a standalone standard. Intellectual property rights. Okay, so there are a lot of intellectual documents. a lot of intellectual information. For example, the logo, the licensed agreements, okay, the software privacy. Okay, these all are the intellectual, your own software, your own documents, your own procedures. Okay, these are intellectual properties. So you should have a system, a procedure, a policy to make sure that your intellectual property rights are adhered to and they are properly identified and controlled. So identify, determine intellectual property IP assets, implement measures to safeguard IP, record IP, that IP is intellectual property, record intellectual property protection procedures, regularly review and update protection practices, and ensure compliance with IP, that is intellectual property protection policies. You need to have a proper documented structure for it. When you talk about protection of records, okay, when you talk about protection of records, okay, you need to make sure that the records that you generate should be properly documented. How exactly are you going to make sure that the records that you have generated are safe and secure? The information in it is not going out. So you need to have a proper procedure for protection of records or control of records. Normally, what is documented is procedure for control of documents, procedure for control of records. Okay. For example, you need to have a document retention policy. Okay, it's the same thing that we discussed in clause number 7. Okay, in clause number 7 we have studies. Okay, let me just go to the clause number 7 once. Yeah, here if you see, it is basically a control log. Okay, document ID, name, version, owner, status, last reviewed, next reviewed. So it has to be there. It's record if not filled is a document. Once it is filled, it is called a record. Okay, a document so a document is something which can be changed, which is dynamic, but a record is something which cannot be changed. Okay, you need to make sure that you have a proper procedure, a proper policy where you make sure that the records that you have generated, okay, are well protected. For example, you need to have the retention policy. Up to how many years you are going to retain the document? How exactly you are going to dispose the document? Okay, so you need to have a proper system. If you are keeping it digitally, how exactly are you going to keep it digitally? How exactly are you going to destroy the data? How exactly are you going to destroy the equipment? What exactly are you going to do to implement, remove the information from the hard disk? Okay, so you cannot remove everything from the, hard cannot be done. Okay, you need to have a system where you say, okay, so we will have this information removed, and the hard disk or the storage device, okay, is going to be performed with some action. That action needs to be there into your system. So privacy and protection of personal identifiable information, we already spoke about it. The PII, the standard 27001, talks about information security, cyber security, and personal information security. So privacy and protection of personal identifiable information. What is a personal identifiable information? The personal identifiable information is anything which is unique to you. Your phone number, your email ID, your medical background, okay, anything, your financial details, your account details, okay, all the, and a lot of things, okay, they are basically private information. You need to have a system, you need to have a procedure where you have a system where you say, okay, we are going to make sure that any of the PII is not going to be disclosed anywhere. Okay, if so, in PII, one is controller and one is processor. Okay, that is majorly defined in 27701. A processor which uses the data. A controller is someone who controls the data. Okay, who will not use the data, but who will control. Okay, keeping the data with them, destroying the data. Okay, basically comes under control. The processor is someone who uses the data, who uses that data, maybe for email, maybe for WhatsApp, maybe for or anything. So before a processor or a controller need to have a consent management system. Okay? You need to have a consent management system where if controller wants to have any control on the data, or if they want to perform any processing, or they want to act as a processor, or both, okay, they will have to take a consent from the owner of the data. Okay, they will have to mention that what all processing they are going to do, what all are they going to do with the controlled data. Okay. So you need to have a proper procedure for privacy and protection of personal identifiable information. Identify the requirements, determine privacy and PII protection obligations, comply, meet applicable laws, regulations and contractual terms, record compliance measures and practices, apply necessary privacy protection procedures, regularly update practices to reflect legal and contractual changes. There may be a lot of legal changes. Now, if you say in India, the DPDP Act has come into force. Okay, this is one of the legal requirement, okay, that need to be followed. There can be changes when you renew these contracts. There can be changes in the contracts. So, what are the changes in the contract? Is there anything which has any relation with the PII? You need to review the contractual requirements, and if there are any changes, you need to implement those changes into your organization and have a proper record of it. Independent review of information security. Of course, yes, you'll have to review your own information security policies, your own information security procedures. Rather, the complete information security management system, the ISMS management system of your organization will have to be regularly and independently reviewed. Independent means the maker and checker cannot be same. Okay. A person who is going to audit your organization, or a person who is going to audit the process, cannot be the process owner. The process owner cannot perform audit or cannot review his own process, his own documentation that you are preparing. It has to be done independently, no conflict of interest. This is done through internal audits. Okay, so of course there are a lot of audits which happen. Okay, cybersecurity audits in the organizations like banks, in the organizations like NBFCs, the public sectors. Okay, so there will be a lot of audits which will be happening. These audits are done through the regulatory bodies, to the legal bodies. But when you talk about your own system, when you talk about ISO 27001, you need to perform a separate internal audit for your organization, and you need to make sure that the system that you are following complies with the requirement that has to be followed, complies with the requirements of ISO 27001. You yourself need to check it regularly. So perform internal audits, have a proper internal audit plan, have a proper objectives, perform a proper audit of the organization. The report needs to be properly filled. How exactly to fill the report? The filling of the report, basically report consists two things. One is evidence. The most important part is evidence, and the second is statement. Okay. The organization complies with the requirements of the standard. Which clause? 4.1. The organization complies with 4.1, where the identification of the relevant interested parties, the internal and external parties, okay, is done. Evidence: mention 2 or 3 interested parties, internal as well as external. That is an evidence. Mention the document number, where exactly this data is, this information is available. So you have to make sure that each and every clause that you write, each and every clause that you audit, need to have a proper statement of conformance. Okay, proper statement of conformance or non-conformance, both. Okay, if it is conforming, write the evidence, write the document number, write the reference number. If it is non-conforming, please write the organization does not comply with the requirements. Okay, what are the requirements? Where did you identify? Does it have the procedure? Okay, so if you have the procedure, if you have the system, but the records are not updated, it will come into a low category of non-conformity. If there is no procedure, if there is no policy defined, okay, no method defined, that will come into higher. Anything which is going to have a direct impact on CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, will come under non-conformance. So you need to have a proper report maintained when you perform the audit of your organization or audit for any of the other organization. If you are acting as a third party, if you are acting as an external audit and you are going to perform the audit for any of the organization who is, you can say if you are performing the audit on behalf of a certification body, you will go to one of his clients and you perform the audit. When you perform the audit, you make sure that the report is properly filled. Internal audit, good or bad, can only be said through the internal audit report. The better you have the internal audit report, okay, you will have good gaps, you will have those gaps, you will have the confidence in the system, and you will know what are the gaps in the organization. So you need to have the report. And how exactly are you going to close those gaps? Okay, what are the gaps, what are the root cause? Okay, you need to mention the root cause, you need to mention the correction that you are going to do, you need to make sure that you mention the corrective action. And if that portion has never been addressed and you see that there it can arise again, you need to take it into risk, and from there you need to map it to the objectives to make sure that this gap doesn't come. If there was a higher risk, if there was a non-conformity which is basically because of removing any of the control, because of removing any of the area, okay, where it was controlled and now you see it is not controlled, it is basically a major non-conformity. Compliance with policies, rules, and standards for information security. So review compliances. Okay. So any rules, any policies that you are basically complying with, the policies that you are complying, the procedures that you are complying, okay, needs to be in a way where you have a proper checking system, okay, which can be done through internal audits. So if you look at the controls 5.35 and 5.36, so both are the part of the internal audit. Documented operating procedures. So you need to have a proper operating procedures for any of the system. Okay, for patching, for onboarding, asset issuance, backup, for procedure for a policy or procedure for backup. Okay, clear screen disk. So you need to have policies or you need to have documented procedures based on which you are going to comply with the requirements of the system. So here we finish with our first control, which basically spoke about the organizational control. As mentioned, we have 37 controls in it. It basically talks about the controls that we need to have in an organization, organizational level controls. Okay, we did not speak about the people, we did not speak about an individual here. Okay, we did not speak about the physical controls that needs to be put, we did not talk about anything about the technological controls, but yes, we spoke about on the organizational level what an organization needs to have into the control to make sure that things happen, where we studied about the policies, information security roles and responsibilities, segregation of duties, management responsibilities, contact with authorities, contact with special interest group, threat intelligence, information security in project management control, inventory of information and other assets, acceptable use of information and other associated assets, return of assets, classification of information, labeling of information, information transfer. Then we have access control, identity management, authentication information, access rights, and others related to the suppliers, related to the supply chain. Then we talk about the cloud services. Then we also talk about the incident management planning, which takes us to clause number 6, assessment and decision on information security event. Then we have information security incidents, what exactly we are going to do, then learning from those what happened. So then collection of the evidences that what happened when the incident. Okay, information security during disruption, we spoke about the BCPs, we spoke about ICT readiness. Okay, we spoke about legal and statutory requirements. We spoke about intellectual property rights. We spoke about protection of records. You need to have a proper documented record. The procedure of control of record. The procedure of control of documents. Then we spoke about PIA, personal identifiable information, that is privacy and protection of personal identifiable information. There are certain regulatory requirements, GDPR for Europe, DPDP for India, PDPA for Saudi, and the same ways every country will have some or the other regulatory requirements, the laws which needs to be taken care when we talk about PII. In information security, we need to have CISO, which is Chief Information Security Officer. And when we talk about PII, we need to have DPO, Data Protection Officer. Then we talk about independent review of information security. We talk about policies, rules and standards. We talk about documented operating procedures. So this is what we have studied in organizational control. Next is basically people controls. Basically in this section, we will be talking about how exactly we need to take care of the individuals, because individuals are the one who are going to have a lot of access to the information, and when they come from different organization, the other organization, and when they come to your organization, there will be a lot of factors which will have a lot of impact on your organizational information. For that, we need to make sure that we perform some control. Okay, the information that a person is going to handle, the way the person is going to share the information or control the information. We need to have a proper procedure, we need to have proper policies to make sure that we control the people in the organization. So first of all, it is screening. Okay, so when any employee comes to an organization, there has to be a proper screening done. We need to see what exactly was his background, where he comes from. Okay, is there any legal cases going against him? Okay, the previous organization, why did he leave the previous organization? Was there any act which can have an impact on your organization also? Okay, so all these things needs to be done at the time of screening. So there can be a pre-employment checks where we talk about background verification before hiring, ongoing verification. We need to see what exactly the person is doing. Okay, so we need to perform a regular checks throughout the employment. Okay, his KPIs, his KRAs, is he following the responsibilities given to him? Is he making sure that the authority that has been given to him is as per the requirement? Okay, the legal compliances. Okay, we need to make sure that they follow a proper legal compliance. They are following all the applicable laws. Okay, which needs to be followed by a person. His all documentations needs to be properly reviewed on time to time. There can be a lot of extra when we talk about opportunity. When a person does some certification courses while he is working in the organization, he attains some qualification. Okay, through this qualification, his competency, his skills can increase. Okay, so if we review it, this can be an opportunity where the extra skills that he has received, the extra competence that he has received, okay, this can be utilized in the organization. Okay, or the people in the organization can be trained with what he has acquired. He can share his experiences. If an organization has a person who is working in the organization since last 10 years, okay, that employee holds a lot of information, a lot of intelligence through his experience in the organization. The people who are coming in the organization as a new part, okay, at that point of time, we need to make sure that there is an organization, there is a knowledge transfer. Okay, so if there is a knowledge transfer, the people under him or the people will know what exactly needs to be followed. Okay, what are the threats that can happen, what are the events that can happen. Okay, of course, yes, none of the confidential information, sensitive information needs to be shared when you are doing a knowledge transfer session. It's just the knowledge. Okay, it's not the disclosing of the information. Okay, terms and conditions of employment. It is very important that the terms and conditions of employment are well structured. You need to have a proper employment agreement in your organization where you mention all the relevant things. For example, the NDAs, non-disclosure agreement, has to be there as a part of the employment agreement. The roles and responsibilities, the duties that is given to him, okay, what all he needs to follow, what are the KPIs. Okay. So this all needs to be well available, well documented in an organization, and what all factors, what all he needs to take care of in terms of information security. Okay, where exactly his role is in the information security management system that the organization is following. Okay, this all needs to be there in the documentation, and this should be understood by the organizational by the people, by the person who is being employed in the organization. So define responsibilities, clearly state information security duties, include in contracts, specify in employment agreements, detail organizational duties, outline the organization's security obligations, specify employee duties, describe employee responsibilities, ensure clarity, make terms understandable and enforceable. Make sure that whatever you write is very clear and very transparent. Okay, anything that you write should not give double meaning, should not be a vague statement. It has to be very clear, it has to be very transparent that this is what needs to be done. If this is not followed, this is what we are going to do. This is the impact that can have if you don't follow the policies, if you don't follow the procedures. Information security awareness, education and training. If you want your organization to be in a proper structured system, information structured system, so the pillars, okay, the major pillars needs to be well structured. They should be strong. and these pillars are basically nothing but your employees. Okay, if your people are well informed about the security incidents, if your people understand what can be the threat, if your people are well trained on the areas where they are responsible for, of course the standard doesn't want that you should give and you should tell everything to all the employees. Okay, you need to identify the needs. Okay, if the person is into IT department, he should be given an information which is relevant to him. A person who is into HR should be given the responsibilities and should be aware about what he is responsible for. Okay, every department, every process owner should know his duties, his place in the organization, rather his place in the information security structure. If you have this, and if it is properly reviewed, and if it is properly documented and updated, okay, your system is going to be strong. This is what all you need to identify when you go for an audit, when you perform your internal audit, or if you perform the external audit. Okay, you need to make sure that these things are well taken care of. So provide awareness, offer informative security awareness programs, deliver training, ensure relevant education and training are given, update regularly, keep personnel informed of policy and procedural change. If there are any changes, let the people know. Job relevant, tailor training to specific job functions. As mentioned, you need not tell everything to all the to all the people. You need to have a tailored trainings specific to the department, specific to the function, specific to the responsible owner. Engage interested parties. Yes, you should include your relevant parties. Okay, you should include all those stakeholders to give the information, to give the proper awareness on the information security, what we are doing, what we as an organization are doing. Okay, which is going to make sure that the information security, the stakeholders, okay, remain in confidence, their needs, their expectations. When you talk about in terms of expectations, your stakeholders will always have an expectation where they want that any information that you hold, okay, should be safe and secure. That information can be the stakeholders information, or that interested party or that stakeholder can be a legal authority, okay, or can be a regulatory department, or can be a regulatory authority, okay, which has the responsibility of the data that you as an organization hold. So if you have the policies, if you have information security policies, display it, okay, to your relevant interested parties. The best possible way as of now today, you can put it in your website. Okay, you can put it in your emails, you can put it in your brochures, the profiles. Put your information security policy. This is one of the thing. Other things, okay, there can be multiple things which an organization can achieve. The intelligence that you get, okay, the learnings that you get from an incident, that awareness you need to float it to the people, and these people should be relevant. That means the stakeholders, the interested parties relevant to your business, relevant to your organization, who come beyond, who come within the context of the organization, needs to be informed. Provide awareness, offer information security awareness programs, deliver trainings, ensure relevant education and trainings are given. Okay, so yes, we have already gone through it. Of course, yes, for the example is annual training sessions. You can have phishing simulations. There are a lot of phishing happenings, there are a lot of scam happenings today. Okay, so if you take these things, okay, you need to have a proper defined process, a proper defined procedure, how exactly you are going to educate it to the people. Okay, you, if for example, if you are a bank, okay, so for now, if you see, the major scam which is happening is the financial scam. Okay, they get the data and they perform a scam, and the information flows out, and there are always a new tricks happening. So when, as a bank, as an organization where you hold a lot of financial information of the organization or the people, okay, you need to make sure that you train your customers, you train your people, you train the public about, you give awareness about the new scams which are happening. Okay, other scams that are happening, what can happen, what they need to do. Like when we get the call from the banks, we get a lot of messages where they say the bank people will never ask for any of the OTPs. Okay, so OTP need not be shared to anyone. So this is what needs to be done for this part: information security awareness, education and training. Disciplinary process. Of course, if the person in the organization, if they are not following the policies that is as is laid down by the organization, okay, there has to be a disciplinary action. The organization will run as a whole. Okay, if there is someone who says no, I will not follow this, I will follow this, no, the person needs to follow what is defined in your procedure, what is defined in the system. Okay, there cannot be a stand-alone system working for the organization. It has to be a process which is being followed by the complete organization as a whole. It should not be a single person followed. The organization should be a process driven, system should have be there, not a people driven. So formalize the process, establish a clear disciplinary process. You need to have a disciplinary process. If something happens, what can be done related to the, if someone is not following the internal policy, there can be different set of actions. If the person is not following the legal requirements, there can be a certain set of disciplinary processes, disciplinary actions. Then you need to communicate, inform all personal and relevant parties about the process. Tell everyone this is what can happen. This has to be properly communicated with all the relevant interested parties. Define violations. Specify what constitutes a policy violation. What, if not done, okay, is a violation. Enforce actions. Implement disciplinary actions for violations. If you have any violation, it is very mandatory, it is very important that you actually implement that disciplinary action. If you leave one today, there can be number of other processes which will stand alone. So there has to be disciplinary process. If there is someone who is not following the process, a disciplinary action can be taken. Disciplinary action is not always terminating the person. It can be a warning, it can be the demotion, it can be change in responsibilities, it can be revocation of the authority. So there can be multiple number of disciplinary action, but there has to be action which needs to be taken, making sure that it does not have a negative impact on the system. So there, for example, there has to be an action policy for data breach or policy violation. Responsibilities after termination or change of employment. Of course, when a person leaves the organization, okay, they hold a lot of information, a lot of know-how about the organization. What in that case? Because you can take the physical assets, but you cannot take the information that he holds in his memory. Okay? That can be done through a process where we call it as a, normally we call it as exit process, okay, where we take all the assets, information assets and the other assets given by the organization, and we also ask him to give a signature on the document where he accepts and he says that yes, he understands that the violation or the information leakage to any other third party after he leaves the organization can have a negative impact on him. The disciplinary process, the disciplinary action can also be taken even after the termination or the or if the person leaves the organization. Okay, and this agreement needs to be legally bounded. However, as per the Contract Act of India, if you say, okay, if two people are signing on a document, even if it is not on a paid agreement where we get a stamp paper, okay, that document is also considered equivalent as if you're signing an agreement. If two parties are accepting what it is written on the document, okay, that can be considered. However, to make it more stronger and easily legally approachable, okay, you should have an agreement on a proper stamp paper, okay, and it has to be properly notified and registered by the notifying authority. If this is being done, okay, the probability of leakage of any of the information from a person to your competitor or to any of the person to whom the information should not be given, okay, this probability will go down. Of course, you cannot make it zero. The probability will go down. Okay. So we need to make sure that after the termination or the change of employment, okay, there has to be a process what needs to be done. Confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements. You need to identify the needs. Of course, yes, you need to have the confidentiality statement into an agreement, or you need to have a non-disclosure agreement where you identify, you determine the confidentiality agreement requirement needs, Okay, what are the agreement requirements? What exactly is written in the agreement that needs to be there? The document agreement, you need to record the terms and conditions, regularly review it, you update agreements as needed. Of course, yes, there can be new policies, there can be new requirements of the organization which can arise. So you can always have an annexure to your agreements, even if it is signed earlier. Okay, you need not change the complete agreement. You can have an annexure where you say that this is the change in this agreement. Okay, and both parties sign and it becomes valid. Obtain signatures, ensure all relevant parties sign agreements, communicate, make terms clear to all signatories. It should be very transparent, it should be very clear to all the signatories. Remote working, okay. Now, after COVID, this has increased, okay. During the COVID, it was not possible to move around. So the concept of remote working came into picture, where an employee sitting at his home or to a remote place can access the information of the organization of his organization, okay, and perform the activities on it. Okay. So we need to have a proper process, a proper procedure, a proper policy of remote working. What all actions, what all controls are you going to apply in your organization to make sure that any system, any information that the person holds, okay, should be safe and secure, even though that person is sitting in some different environment. You need to make sure that you have a process, you have a system where you bring that employee into your environment and it works. For example, the VPN, the virtual private network. Okay, you can have a VPN where if the person signs in into his VPN, okay, he is able to access to the requirement to the documentations. And you also need to make sure that the access rights which are given to the employee, the person who is working remotely, okay, should be identified as the high threat, as the high risk, okay, where the information from there can flow out. But the access rights which are given to him should be in such a way that he is not able to take any information out from that device, from that machine. So apply security measures, implement remote working protections, safeguard information accessed or stored remotely, ensure secure authentication, that is control access, encrypt data, use encryption for data in transit and at rest. Okay. Review regularly, update security practices as needed. As mentioned, you can also use, like for example, the VPN access or the use of encrypted devices or remote work policy need to be there. Information security event reporting. If there is any information security event, if there is an event, if there is an attack, what, how exactly it is going to be reported, who is going to report it? There should be a different set, a separate set of people who should be responsible for reporting this event. It can be organization wise, it can be process wise, it can be function wise. Okay. The risk owner can be given as the responsibility of reporting the event, or it can be a different structured level of reporting. Okay. Where should the FIR should come? FIR, first information report. Okay. So who is going to give the first information? First information, of course, is going to be given by the person who has encountered with the event. Okay. So we need to have a structured formula where once the event is noted and once if it is reported, who is going to handle it? Okay, how exactly it is going to handle? We need to have a proper system on it where set up reporting, establish a proper reporting system, enable timely reporting, facilitate quick reporting. You should have a proper process where it should be very easy for any person who has encountered with the event, okay, to communicate to the next level. Use appropriate channels, define reporting channels. Of course, as I said, there has to be hierarchy, there has to be a structure followed for the reporting. Promote use, encourage personnel to report. Of course, yes, we need to inform people, we need to promote people, we need to encourage the people. If they see any event, okay, any incident which is happening in the organization, they should report it. Okay, there are scenarios, there are things where if there is an event, a person sees, he says, okay, no problem, let it happen, okay, it will go off, it is not my job, it is not my duty to report it. So we need to inform the person, inform the people, educate the people that this reporting, if it is not done, it can have a major impact on the system. So the awareness, this promotion, this encouragement is only possible through the training, through the awareness. Of course, In some of these standards, for example, like 27001, we have a whistleblowing policy there where it says we can incentivize, okay, maybe some incentives can be given to the person who reports. But in this case, if you put incentiveness, okay, that is not going to have that much impact, okay, because incentives are not given for something reporting which is going bad in the organization, or if there is a something which is going to have a negative impact, a big impact on the organization, okay, it is the duty. Of course, yes, we can have this policy, we can have this procedure if the objectives are met. So you can have the objective as reporting time, okay, what is the time it is going to report, okay, if that objective is achieved, of course you can say, okay, so if we achieve this target, there will be a program, there will be an incentive program, okay, which can be followed. Track reports, monitor and address reports. So today we are going to stop it here. That is till the 6.8, which talks about the people control. Here we have studied about how exactly we need to control the people. Tomorrow we are going to start with the physical controls. Tomorrow we will finish with physical controls and the technological controls.